Welcome back. Our guest today was named the best source for IRA advice by the Wall Street Journal and also named America's IRA expert by Mutual Funds magazine. He's an author, speaker, and television host. Our guest today, Ed Slott, is known to financial advisors for his highly informative IRA training programs. He's also known to consumers for his 5 books on retirement distribution planning, which include Stay Rich for Life, Growing and Protecting Your Money in Turbulent Times. He's also hosted 3 public television specials aimed at helping investors minimize their tax burden and stressing the importance of working with a competent financial advisor. Please welcome today, Ed Slott. Ed, good to have you on the show.
Thanks, great to be here. Thanks, Dave.
Great. You know, as you know, today our topic is required minimum distributions. So, in your opinion, what are the 3, or not even 3, but what are the most important things that people need to remember about required minimum distributions?
Well, they have to remember that they're coming. You know, once you turn 70 and a half, everything changes. Your whole life you spent saving, building, investing. Now you have to go the other way and start taking money out. So it's a bit of a transition. And some people, a lot of people I hear, don't even need the RMD money. You know, it's forced out. It's kind of out of their control. So they have to take it. It adds income to their taxes, so it raises their taxes, even though in most cases they don't really need the money. So it is kind of upsetting for many people who spent their whole life saving and now are being forced to take that money out, and that's just the tax rules.
So if you can take a minute and just tell our viewers, what are some of the most common mistakes that they need to watch out for regarding RMDs?
All right. You have to take account of all your retirement accounts. So that includes IRAs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs. You might have a 401k at a job, or you may have several, or a 403b. So you have to take all the plans into account. But they all work differently. For example, for your IRAs, you have to add the balances. You actually have to calculate the required amount from each account, but you can take the required amount from any combination of accounts. You can do the same thing with a 403b, but you can't mix and match, and that's where the problems come in. In other words, you can't satisfy a required IRA distribution by taking from your 401k. That has to come from your 401k. If you have several 401ks, you can't combine them. The RMD has to be taken from each one. And you might have different beneficiaries on certain IRAs or 401ks, so it can get confusing. Probably a better course of action once you get past 70 and a half is maybe trying to consolidate your accounts so you don't have accounts everywhere, because it can get overwhelming.
Now, what if somebody's still working at age 70 and a half? Then how does that affect their RMDs differently?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's an area where we see lots of problems. There is a special exception, as you just said, if you're still working for a company that you don't own. So it's not for self-employed people. That's one mistake. If you own more than 5% of the company, the exception does not apply to you. But let's say you're an employee at a company that you don't own. If you're still working there, you can delay that 70 and a half date until the year you retire. So if you retire at 80, it doesn't start till 80. But the exception, or the waiver, you might call it, from RMDs only applies to the 401k of the company you're still working for. It doesn't apply to your IRAs or other plans you may have. So from those accounts, let's say your IRA, there is no still working exception. You still have to pull that money out. So the exception only applies to that company's plan of the company you're still working for.
So if someone is still working, they have a plan, but the plan accepts rollovers from other 401ks, in theory, someone could roll money into that active 401k and avoid RMDs until they retire. Is that correct?
That's true. If the 401k allows rollovers in, they don't have to. This is one unusual area of the tax law. The tax law is rigid in many respects, but it happens to be liberal in this area. In other words, the plan rules can be much more rigid. They don't have to allow everything the IRA tax rules or the IRS tax rules allow. So what you just talked about, even the still working exception, the plan doesn't have to allow it just because the law allows it. So you have to know if your plan allows rollovers in the first place.
Correct, correct. Now, what if, you mentioned before that some people don't even want this money. So what do you tell people they can do with these RMDs if they're forced to take them but they don't really want or need the money? What are their best options in your opinion?
Well, I tell you, it's a good problem when you don't need money from your IRA. And remember, the distributions you start off with are very small. The required amounts the first few years are under 4%. But you still have to take them. And you can't do certain things with them. You know, the number one question I get from financial advisors, and it's logical, but the tax law isn't logical. Their question is, well, my client is, say, 72, taking required minimum distributions. They have to pay tax on that money. They're paying tax on it anyway, so can they, if they don't need the money, can they just convert it to a Roth IRA? The answer is no, absolutely not, even though it makes sense. Why? Because the tax law says you cannot convert a required minimum distribution. That's why if you're thinking conversion, you might want to think about that before you start at 70, before you turn 70 and a half. The first dollars out have to be the required amount. And those amounts can't be converted to a Roth. You just have to take that money. After you satisfy your required amount, then you can convert other monies, but then you'd have to take out more. So what else can you do with that RMD if it's not wanted? You can use it, once it's out of the IRA, it's regular money. You can use it for anything you want. You can bet it on a horse if you want to. Or if you really want to do a Roth conversion, you could use that money to pay the tax on converting other IRA funds that are eligible to be converted. Or if you're still working and you want to contribute to a Roth IRA, you can use that money not to roll it over, but to contribute to a Roth IRA if you're still working. Now that's interesting because Roth IRAs, you can continue to contribute after 70 and a half. With traditional IRAs, you can't. So there are some uses for the unwanted RMDs. That's great.
I know you well enough to know that you're conservative, so I know you really aren't espousing betting it on a horse, but I like the idea about using it to convert other monies to a Roth IRA and to pay the tax. Sure.
Yeah, I'm just making the point you can do anything you want with it once it's out of the IRA. It's free money.
That's great. Ed, we need to take a quick break right now. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk to Ed Slott more about some of the mistakes that people make, particularly with beneficiary designations on IRAs and retirement plans. And we'll also talk about what to do if you make a mistake and subject yourself to the penalty. There might just be some ways to get out of it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here today with America's IRA expert, Mr. Ed Slott, who as a financial advisor is someone that I've known of for many, many years. And Ed, as you know, in the financial advisory world, you are truly known as America's IRA expert. So I appreciate you being here today. And
all right, thanks.
And you know, we tease people a little bit up front about the fact that if you make a mistake with the RMDs, you do not take enough, there is a 50% 5-0 penalty. But I also know that you have a way that might, where somebody may not have to pay that penalty if they make such a mistake. Mind sharing that with our viewers?
And it's not a secret way, you just have to know it. And first of all, I don't want to scare people. It is, as you say, I say it the same way as you, by the way. I say 50%. Because people think maybe you meant 15.
That's right,
no, it's 50% of the amount you should have taken but didn't. That's a pretty stiff penalty.
And that's in addition to the tax.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, most people don't pay the penalty. And here's why. Let's say you're just starting RMDs, you forgot, you were confused, you made the calculation wrong, maybe the advisor made a mistake, somebody at the bank made a mistake, you had medical issues. You know, there are a whole bunch of reasons why this might be missed, or the calculation is off and you didn't take enough. All you have to do, first thing you have to do, as soon as you realize, and it's usually the next year, as soon as you realize you missed out, because if it was that year, you could still make it up. So I'm talking about when you realize, sometimes it's at tax time, that the prior year you didn't take $5,000. Well, that's a $2,500 penalty. What you do, as soon as you realize the mistake, you immediately take the misdistribution out right then. You can't take it back in the other year because that's closed unless you had a time machine or something.
Right.
So you can't go back to that year. So you have to take it immediately. I suggest taking a separate standalone distribution, like a makeup distribution, so you can trace it. That's the one you missed. And then take your regular one. Then, once you take what I call immediate corrective action, that's what IRS likes to see, that once you caught it, in good faith, you took that distribution. Then you file Form 5329, or work with your accountant or tax preparer, file Form 5329, 5329. And on there, there's a line on the second page where you can say, I missed the distribution, here's the reason. You don't have to give a big explanation. I had medical issues, I was confused, I made the wrong calculation, and that's all. And you put an RC, computer programs will type that in. The letters RC stands for reasonable cause, and you don't have to pay the penalty. Years ago you did, you don't. You just show zero, and IRS in almost every case will waive that penalty, but you have to file the form to get the waiver.
Form 5329, got it. Now,
that's right.
We talked in the show.
And here's another fact about that form. If you don't file the form, the statute never begins to run. So let's say you forgot about it for 10 years. It doesn't go away. That 50% penalty can be brewing plus interest and penalties. So you have to file that form.
Ed, really quick, in the 30 seconds we have left, can you share with our viewers? Can you share with our viewers what the one most common mistake is that you see with beneficiary designations on retirement money?
Well, losing them, not keeping them up to date. Every time this is what you have to think about. You have an IRA, and the beneficiary determines how soon it will be taxed, how much it will be taxed, and every time you have what I call a life event, a birth, a death, a marriage, a divorce, you had a new grandchild, a change in the tax law, update that beneficiary form. Name primary beneficiaries and contingent beneficiaries. That goes for every IRA you have, every Roth IRA, every 401k or company plan. And keep those where people can find it. If they can't find it, it's the same thing as if you never had it.
Yep, and also make sure you don't have a trust in most cases as beneficiary of the IRA.
Well, you know, that's where you need advice.
Right.
There are reasons to name a trust. You have a large IRA, you have a beneficiary that's a minor, disabled, incompetent, unsophisticated, afraid they're going to spend it all, they're spendthrifts. There are reasons to name a trust. Mostly when you don't trust. They should have called it a don't trust, because if you trusted them, you wouldn't need a trust.
That's great, a don't trust. I love it. Ed, thanks so much. We're out of time. Time flies when you're having fun. I appreciate you being here today and look forward to the next time. And for our viewers, stay with us. When we come back, Morgan and I will talk more about required minimum distributions and some of the things that you need to watch out for and some of the things that you need to pay attention to. We'll be right back after the break.